you got something that you've got to give up to get something else, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to transform our voltage from high voltage to low voltage. At the same time, because of reciprocity, give and take, our voltage is going to go down, our amperage goes up, okay? So we got a telephone pole out here, and it's got on top of the telephone pole, we've got a transformer. Inside that transformer are two coils of wire. There's some other stuff in there as well, but primarily what makes the transformer a transformer is it's got two coils of wire. So the coils are like this. If we want to take 100,000 volts and make 100 volts out of it, what we have to do is we have to have two coils of wire, and they've got to be different, okay? So what's the difference between those two coils of wire? Is that showing this by chance?
Yes.
Yes, good, okay.
One's more tightly coiled and the other one's more spread
One's
out.
more tightly coiled and one is more spread out. So what we can say is that this coil of wire has more turns on it than this one, okay? So what we're talking about is a turns ratio. Turns ratio inside of a transformer is what makes the transformer work. And for those who are not here today, this is just a course overview. So this is not on the first test. So what makes the transformer work and what makes the turns ratio, what occurs with the turns ratio is, let's say we've got two coils of wire and they have exactly the same number of turns. Show good?
Yes. I just
Okay.
want the girls to be able to see it.
Yeah. So we got two coils of wire, same number of turns on both coils. All right. So what we have is a supply of electrons. Supply of electrons we call current, which is our amperage, right? So we supply a flow of electrons to this coil of wire. Now, because of the laws of electromagnetism, anytime we have a charged particle moving through a circuit, we create a magnetic field. Y'all seen in a junkyard the way they take a great big magnet and they stick it to the top of a car and they pick the car up and then they take it and they drop it into a crusher or a shredder and it doesn't have any claws? Well, the reason that it can do that is it's a magnet, but it's a magnet that you can turn on and off. But what they're doing is they're running electricity through a coil of wire to create a magnet. And the reason they can drop it into the crusher is because they turn the electricity off and it drops. The magnetic field goes away. So a charged particle, an electron, moving through a coil of wire creates a magnetic field. Okay? That's law number one. Law number two says that if we take and we use alternating current, which is what you get in your house, you don't get direct current. You get direct current in a battery, but you get alternating current through the wall. Okay? So you got alternating current, electricity goes in, comes out, goes in, comes out. Very important to have alternating current because what that does is it creates a magnetic field, but the magnetic field changes constantly. So it's flipping back and forth and back and forth. The importance of that is that if we move another coil of wire close to it, that magnetic field that's reaching out will go through this coil of wire and in turn create electric flow in the opposite coil that goes back and forth as well. Okay? Big deal, right? You used electricity to create magnets to create electricity. Big deal. Well, it is a big deal, and here's why. In this example, if we used 100 volts, 100 volts with the current that we're using, then what we would get is 100 volts over here. But if, let's say, I used a coil wire over here, now how many turns do I have on this side? One. How many do I have over here? Two. Right. According to the transformer law, the voltage on the secondary side of a transformer is going to change in direct relationship to the number of turns, or the turns ratio between the primary and secondary side. What that means is that if I supply this with 100 volts and it's got 2 turns, bingo, very good, you're catching on quick. So what I have over here is 50 volts. Okay, it's a direct proportion. I've cut my turns in half, I've cut my voltage in half. Now, let's go back to this. I have 100,000 volts, I need 100 volts. How many do I need on the primary side? Versus the second, a lot, right? And how many fewer do I need on the secondary side? A lot less, right? So what I'm going to have on the primary side, if I have 100,000 volts, I'm probably going to have 1/1,000, the number of turns on the secondary side. Okay? So we got to voltage that, you know, the hospital, or in this scenario, your house can use. 100,000 volts can be very dangerous to use, just in everyday applications, but it's a whole lot cheaper to use 100,000 volts in supply. Okay. So now we got a voltage that we can actually utilize. Now now this becomes a hospital. It's no longer a house, now it's a hospital. So it goes into the X-ray imaging system, but we need what kind of voltage?
50 to 100 kVp.
Bingo, and kVp is kilovoltage. What do we have here? 100,000, which is 100
KVP.
kVp. Right, so now we've got to take this thing that they did for us, or did to us, depending on what your perspective is, and we've got to reverse it. So what are we going to do?
Flip the coils, I guess?
We're going to have to flip it back around, right? So what we're going to have is fewer turns on the primary side or fewer turns on the secondary side? The primary side is where you supply the electricity. Am I going to need more turns on the secondary side or more turns on the primary side? Secondary side, right. So now I'm going to have a few turns here and I'm going to have a whole bunch of turns over here. What do I need to supply to this to make it work? Amperage, which is current. But not only do I have to have current, but I have to have electrons, which is current, right? Goes back and forth. Not reciprocity in this case, but electricity, but it's alternating current. So supply alternating current to the primary side, and it sets up a changing magnetic field, right? Now if I move a secondary coil close enough to it, that magnetic field interacts with that and it creates a alternating current secondary side, right? But what's the difference between them now? The secondary has more, what? Coils, and so that creates more
Amperage.
not amperage, voltage, right? So now we've got kilovoltage. So we went from kilovoltage to voltage, now we have kilovoltage. The problem here, excuse me, is that we need a range, okay? So we need to be able to go from 50 kVp to 100 kVp. So we need something in place where we can use only a portion of the coils and not necessarily all of them for every single X-ray that we create. So before we get to this transformer, we're going to have a different transformer. Okay? That particular transformer only has one coil, but that coil, what we're going to do is we're going to plug into it in set places on one side. The other side, the secondary side, so this is primary side, this is the secondary side. Secondary side, we can plug in anywhere we want, okay? Still uses a transformer law. Transformer law says that alternating current supplied to the primary side will create alternating current in the secondary side proportional to the turns ratio between the primary and secondary side, much later this semester. Okay, but here's the thing, if I plug into this transformer in exactly the same spot, what is my turns ratio between the primary side and the secondary side? Did it change or is it identical?
The
It's the
same.
same. So if I give this 100 volts, what am I gonna get over here? 100 volts, right? But if I go down here, what's gonna happen to my voltage? It's not the same anymore.
It's gonna be
I have
Increased.
more on the secondary side than what I had on the primary side, so my voltage increases. If I squeeze them together and it goes to here, what happens?
Decreases.
Voltage decreases. So using this, which is called an auto transformer, that is basically a rheostat. Okay, you know what a rheostat is? You use them all the time.
Like a thermostat?
Yeah, a thermostat is a type of rheostat. It's something that controls electricity to the point where you can increase or decrease something incrementally.
Is it like the thing on the side of your house that people fix? Is it kind of what that is?
The thing that spins?
Yeah, that
No,
thingy.
that's just a meter.
Oh.
Where you see a rheostat is, do any of you have a knob on the wall that you can turn the lights up or down with?
Mhm.
That's a rheostat. That's
Oh.
all it is. It's a rheostat. So, auto transformer is a type of rheostat. Works off of the transformer law. Number of turns on the primary side, in relationship to the number of turns on the secondary side, you can turn it up or turn it down. That's all it is, rheostat. So now we've got a way to increase or decrease voltage to send into the high voltage transformer. This is a high voltage transformer, sometimes referred to as a high tension transformer. Okay, that's high voltage transformer, and its sole purpose for living is to take what you feed it and boost it from voltage to kilovoltage. Okay, so this is also your KVP selector. Okay, you'll see when you get into clinicals, you'll see some of the things we talked about on Monday, KVP, MA, and time on your control panel. Okay, when you adjust your KVP for an exam, or you select, let's say, a hand versus chest x-ray, you're gonna use 110,000 volts or 110 kilovoltage for a chest x-ray. You're gonna use for a finger maybe 50, okay? So the difference between those two, and whenever you push those different exams, what you're actually doing is you're taking your auto transformer and you're either squeezing those contacts together for a finger or a hand, or you're spreading them out for chest x-ray. What you're actually doing is you're selecting your KVP here. Do you have KVP?
Yes.
No. No, you don't have KVP until it gets over here to the high voltage transformer. All you're doing is selecting what you're gonna feed into this. So if this is set, this is a set turns ratio, if this thing is working right, then what you're reading on your control panel should be good over here. Now, if this is screwed up, then, good luck with the other part, but that doesn't change. This is what's changing. So this is where we select our KVP. This is where we create it. Okay, am I still on the camera?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Because we're going all the way around the room eventually. So now we've got high voltage, we've got adjustable high voltage that we can use to create any x-ray level within reason. So we can go anywhere from 40 all the way up to 150 kVp. You're never going to use that, probably never going to use that. Your range is going to be between 50 kVp and maybe 120. Okay, but you can do that. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take that out of there and we're going to send it into the x-ray tube. Inside of the x-ray tube, you got a lot of different components. And that x-ray tube is just a glass vacuum tube. It's a high dollar, complicated light bulb is all it is. But it's got different components. I'm going to pass this around. Be careful with these things because I can't really replace them. And they are vacuum, just like an x-ray tube, or just like a light bulb. So I'm going to pass these around. If you drop them, it's going to sound like a war zone in here. Because you drop a light bulb and what happens? Is it shatters and it makes a big boom, right? So be real careful not to drop them. I've got a couple of them I'm gonna send around. And then I'm gonna send around some individual parts as well. Where's my filament? So what I want you to do as you look at these is look inside, and what you'll see is a disc. And if you turn that tube, what you'll notice is the disc, it looks a lot like this, turns with it, okay? So there's a purpose for it turning. At the other end, what you'll see is what looks like a light bulb, okay? That one's a little bit heavier, it's got a little bit of a added component to it that we'll talk about here in a bit. All right, so you got a disc, and then at the other end, and you probably can't see it on this one, you'll be able to see it on that one. And at the other end, what you'll see is what looks like a light bulb. So you got a couple of different wires inside of it, just like a light bulb. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the electricity that we've transformed from low voltage to adjustable high voltage, and we're gonna send it into the X-ray tube. And in the X-ray tube, again, we've got on one end, we've got this thing, just kind of like a little cup, and it's got two filaments in it. The purpose for the two filaments doesn't really matter at this point. We'll get into it. Now, am I still on?
Yep. Oh, no.
No.
Sorry.
I can adjust it.
Are you sure? Okay.
But we'll get into it later in the semester. All right. So one end, we got these two filaments. On the other end, we've got this great old big plate, big fat plate. And a plate, I probably should draw that a little bit differently. So we got a plate like that. So the purpose for the plate is to actually create X-rays. The purpose for the filaments are to provide electricity until we get ready to create X-rays. So what we're going to do is we're going to take alternating current, we're going to send it into the auto transformer so we can adjust our voltage. We're going to take that and then we're going to send it into the high voltage transformer so we boost it up to the kilovoltage levels that we need. At the same time, coming off of this, we've got a secondary circuit that controls our amperage, our current. It's not our current here, it's going to be our current over there. So we've got a way to adjust that, and our amperage is going to be somewhere between 100 to 500 milliamps. Now, what does the prefix milli mean? Kilo means 1,000. Milli means
Million?
1,000. Okay? So it's going to be very high voltage, very low amperage. Okay? So it's going to go through this, but remember, we're already running at, we're coming off this side, so we're at 100 volts. But we need something more like 15 volts. Okay? So what did we do here? We used more turns on the secondary side than we had on the primary side, so that we took voltage from a relatively low level and we increased it to high level. So what are we going to do to change from, we'll make it simple, we'll say 10. 100 volts down to 10 volts.
You need to go through even slower.
Okay, we're going to have more turns on the primary side than what we're going to have on the secondary side. Right? So we've selected our amperage, but we need to decrease our voltage. The reason that we want to decrease our voltage is when...
Yeah, do you want it to be...
Yeah. Dang
Maybe
it.
one of us should just be your camera.
Maybe I need one of those fisheye
Oh, yeah.
lenses. All right, so this is filament circuit. So coming off of the auto transformer, we use this filament circuit to create low amperage, set amperage at lower voltage. The reason we want lower voltage at this point is because voltage, again, is what makes the electrons go, okay? The amperage doesn't really make the electrons go. A collection of amps or electrons bunched together creates voltage, and that makes the electrons go. But that voltage is what makes them move. All right. So back to walking across the carpet. You scoop up all these electrons, and you've only scooped up a couple. Okay. You get close to a doorknob. Is it going to jump? Are you going to get that static release? No. But if you got a lot of them, then you create what we call potential difference. The potential difference between you and the conductor, the doorknob, changes. Okay, what does potential mean?
Potential energy.
Potential energy, potential.
Same. It's building up.
It's there. You got the potential. You say somebody's got a lot of potential. What are you saying about
Like they're not applying themselves enough
them? They may
to
not be
reach
applying
whatever.
themselves. They've got all the ability in the world. They just might not be, applying themselves. So potential. We've got electric potential. So if we get a lot of electrons, you got a lot of potential difference, a lot of electric potential between you and the doorknob, and then it jumps. But you got to have a lot of electrons to create that voltage. Okay. What we don't want is once we get electrons here at the filament, we don't want them to jump across the tube until we're ready for it. Okay. If we apply kVp to that right away, it goes across the tube. It's a lightning bolt. But if we only have 10 volts going through it, what's the likelihood that it's going to jump across the tube?
Not much.
Very good. Right. So what we're going to have is a filament current. The filament current also plugs into the X-ray tube. Now we need to adjust again. You got it?
Got it, yeah.
Okay. Also goes into the X-ray tube and plugs in to the filament as well. Now, we come up to the point of creating X-rays. So you got a chest X-ray. Who was here Monday? Okay. Has everybody had an opportunity to look at the videos and kind of get your, some sort of idea of what's going on? When you go back to make the X-ray, you've got a button that sometimes two buttons that you push. One is a prep button and the other is an exposure button. If it's a single button, it's going to be a two-position button so that you push it part way down to prep the machine, and then when you make the exposure, you push it all the way down. All right, so when we prep, that prep button, what's happening whenever we push the prep button is this heats up just like a light bulb. No different from a light bulb. It just heats up to the point of glowing. If it wasn't inside that big tube of housing, you could actually see it glow. You can't see it glow, but if all that was taken away, you could see it glow just like a light bulb. So that heats up, okay? At the same time, y'all saw this end of the tube where it would spin if you turn the tube. That starts to spin. The reason it starts to spin is because this being just like a light bulb, what happens with a light bulb? You flip a light on, and I'm not talking about a fluorescent light or a LED light.
Edison? Like an Edison bulb?
Yeah,
It gets hot?
it gets hot, right? You reach up and you touch it after it's been on for a while, and you're losing fingerprints, right? So it gets hot. The main thing that we create in an X-ray tube is not X-rays, it's not light, it's heat. We don't want it. We want to get rid of it the best we can. The main thing that will destroy an X-ray tube is heat, but the main thing we create in an X-ray tube is heat. Now, I'll pass this thing around, and this is not the best demonstrator of what I want you to see. This is the spinny part of the X-ray tube before they made spinny parts of the X-ray tube. This is too, okay? So, this is probably primarily copper, but it's probably got a tungsten coating on it, and you'll see these. If we took that stream of electrons that eventually we're going to release the potential, send them across the X-ray tube, and if we bombard this thing, which we call an anode, electrical components, you got an anode and a cathode. The cathode is the negative side, the anode's the positive side. So we got an anode here. And if we bombard this anode with enough electrons, enough heat, it's gonna melt it, and you'll see that on here. This one, you can kinda see it, this one, you can definitely see it. So let's mix it up, send it this way. Alright, so we're gonna send the electrons, when we prep, we push the prep button, what's gonna happen is we light this up and we spin this. The purpose for spinning this is to change the point of impact, okay? So something heats up, let's say you put a pan over a fire, you got a fire going here, and you put a pan over it like that. Is the whole pan gonna get hot?
Well, eventually.
Eventually,
Yeah.
but what part's gonna be the hottest?
The
The
closest
one
to the
that's
flame.
directly over the fire.
That right there. So if you move the pan around, you save some of the heat to, the overall pan, or to this area, right? Same principle. We're gonna take this thing, we're gonna spin it around and around. Because the main thing that we create in an X-ray tube is heat. The main thing that's gonna kill X-ray tube is heat. Bingo. So we wanna preserve the life of the X-ray tube the best we can. So we're gonna spin this around to change the point of impact. We still only at this point have amperage. We have potential energy. We haven't released it yet. Okay? Everybody with me so far? All right. So the only thing that we've energized at this point is the filament circuit. So this is a filament circuit. If this is a high voltage transformer, this would be a low voltage transformer. Thank you. I'm going right back. Maybe not quite so far yet. It looks like I must still be there. So that's low voltage that's the only thing that we've energized so far. All right?
Perfect.
So when I'm ready to create X-rays, I've hit my prep button. The prep button lights this up, spins this, and gets it ready to make exposure. Takes about a second for this to get up to speed. You can't make an exposure until it gets up to speed. So you hit the prep button, you hear the machine wheel up, and what you're actually hearing is turn into that. It settles, it kind of goes zzz, like that. It's ready to make an X-ray. You push the exposure, now you light up the high voltage section. Okay, so you send the high voltage over, and now you've increased the potential difference between here and here. You've got a collection of electrons that just can't go anywhere except for through the filament. But whenever you hit it with a high voltage, what you're going to get is a miniature lightning bolt. So these electrons that you stored here are going to travel across the tube depending on how high the voltage is. If it's 50 kVp, they may come across about a third of the speed of light. If it's 110 kVp, maybe half of the speed of light. So they travel, faster depending on how high the voltage is. We still don't have X-rays. We don't have X-rays until these hit right there. Now, I don't like this color, so I'm gonna find me a different one. Makes my eyes do things. All right. So now what's going to happen, and we got to really get, kind of conceptual here because this is not something you can see. We're going back down to the atomic level. So in an atom, what we have is inside the middle of the atom, we have positive charges, which are protons. We have neutral charges, which are neutrons, and we have, on the outside, we've got electrons. This thing is made of tungsten. Tungsten has properties that are ideal for creating X-rays. Some things will be better in some respects, but what we need is something that can withstand a lot of heat, and it's got a big nucleus. Okay? The importance of the big nucleus is that it's got a lot of protons, which means it's also got a lot of electrons. Now, how X-rays are created is, the theory behind how X-rays are created, is that it's going to occur in one of two ways. Okay? What's going to happen is as these electrons enter at the atomic level, you're adding electrons traveling at a very high rate of speed. What they're going to do is one of two things. One of three things, really. Most of them, in all honesty, are going to bypass that and do nothing. except for add heat to this. That's all they're gonna do. Because the main thing we create is heat. So the main thing that we're dealing with here is heat. Right, so most of them aren't gonna do anything. Most of the ones that are gonna do something are gonna pass so far away from the nucleus of the atom they don't do much. But a few of them are gonna get close to the nucleus of the atom. Now, what do you have in the nucleus? Protons. What is an electron?
Negatively
It's
charged.
negative charge. Proton is
Positive.
opposites attract. Right. So what we can kind of think of the model here is let's say we've got a meteorite that's traveling through the solar system, and it gets within the gravitational pull of the Earth. What's going to happen to it? If it's traveling a straight line and the Earth is right here, what's going to happen? It's going to have because of gravitational pull, it's going to have a tendency to go towards the Earth, right? So if it's way out here, what's the gravitational pull going to be compared to that?
It's gonna be lower.
Lower, right. So if we have this one really close, then the gravitational pull, so to speak, of the nucleus of the atom is going to grab this electron and it's going to reroute it in a different direction. So, according to the law of conservation of energy, we don't really create or destroy energy, we just kind of transform it, okay? So if this thing is screaming in with 100 kVp worth of potential difference, as really we're going to call it KeV, but it's really the same thing, and it leaves with 1 kEV worth of potential difference, where'd the other 99 go?
Did it go to the other electrons? In the,
We'll get there in a minute. That's a possibility, but not in this case. Where'd it go?
Shot it out.
It shot it out, shot the energy out, shot it out in the form of a X-ray photon.
Oh.
Okay? This is the first way that we're going to create X-rays. It's the most common way. It is we call it BRIMS. Okay? BRIMS is not really an abbreviation, it's a shortened version of Bremsstrahlung. It's BRIMS. Right? Bremsstrahlung is a German word for braking or slowing down. Okay, so this came in with a lot of energy. Because of the gravitational pull of the nucleus of the atom, it slowed it down dramatically, and we kicked off an X-ray photon equivalent to the difference between this and this. So that photon, that X-ray photon, what's the energy level? It's 99, right? It's 99 kVp X-ray photon. We can create a chest X-ray if we have enough of those, okay? The other way is if the electron comes in and it strikes one of these orbital electrons, it pops it out of place, okay? So now you got a free radical. In the X-ray tube, doesn't really matter, but the same thing happens inside of your body. All right, so we eject this electron, and so now we've got a vacancy here. It's an unnatural condition for this atom to be in. So what it's going to do is it might snag another electron that's coming through, it may pop into place. Okay, so now it's happy again. If it doesn't do that, then it may take one of these electrons and pop it down into place. So you've got that again. But now we've got an unnatural condition here. So what's going to happen there?
Another one's gonna fall into
Another one's
place.
going to pop into its place, right? And then another one's going to pop into its place. Okay? So you start this cascading effect, this snowball effect, and this is what we call characteristic X-ray creation. Characteristic X-ray creation. What's going to happen is that when that electron leaves its shell and another one replaces it, it's going to kick off an X-ray photon as well. The energy of that X-ray photon is going to be equivalent to the difference between the energy that holds these electrons into place and the energy that holds whatever electron goes in and replaces that electron, the energy that holds it into place. So the energy that holds this one into place, because we use tungsten atoms, the binding energy that holds that into place is always 69.5. every time we have a tungsten atom, the inner shell binding energy is going to be 69.5 keV. Okay, it is characteristic of the tungsten atom. Okay, so it's characteristic of the tungsten atom, and this is what we call the K shell. Why they did that, I don't know, but the innermost shell is K shell. That would make that the L shell. Okay, the L shell binding energy is 12. Okay, so 69 point the X-ray photon that's going to be created, if this electron replaces that electron, the X-ray photon that's created is going to be based on the difference. Mathematically, difference means subtraction, right? It's going to be the difference between this and this. So what is my energy level for that? 57.5, right. So that's a 57.5 kVp X-ray photon we can shoot a hand with that. Okay? So two different ways that we're going to create X-rays. One is characteristic. It's characteristic of the tungsten atom. If we change the type of target that we use, then our characteristic spectrum will be totally different. These are going to exist at specific intervals or specific energy levels based on those binding energies. But the brims, which are based on the slowing down, can exist at any energy level. So, statistically, according to Bouchon, I think he's way off on this for reasons we'll talk about later in the semester. And it's not him that's way off; it's the science behind it. But my personal opinion is it's just not logical. Is that 85% of what we create are brims, X-ray photons. 15% are characteristic photons. Okay? But here's the rub. This is X-ray creation. The main thing that we create? Heat. Second to that is light. Third to that is split between these two things. And it's on the order of, an average X-ray beam, 99% everything else, 1% X-rays. So all that we've done yields us that. Okay? But here's the other rub, is we're talking about amperage, and we're talking about, I'm going to get some faces in this one. Uh-oh. Or not. I'm going to get ceiling. All right. Yeah, you can move out if your camera's shy. All right. So when we're talking about X-ray creation, we're talking about kilovoltage and okay, we've got kVp and we've got M milliamperage. Yeah, milliamperage. Okay, so kVp is 100,000 volts. Well, let's say 100,000 volts. Let's say for 100 kVp, 100 kVp. So if we have 100 MAS, then we're going the opposite direction. 100 kVp is, adding 3 zeros. 100 mass would be, let's say 100 MA would be 0.1 amps. Okay? Now, amp is just a measure of electrons. I should have verified this before it came in, but it's somewhere on the order of 6.25 times 10 to the 18th power electrons is 1 amp. Okay? So, what we're looking at on a 1 amp exposure is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So if we've made a 1,000 milliamp exposure, that's how many X-ray photons would be created, or no, I'm sorry, that's how many electrons would be sending. All right? So back over there, how much of what we send becomes X-rays?
Just that 1%.
Just 1%. We still got a lot of X-rays? Well, what if we don't make a 1,000 MA exposure? What if our total mass is 1? How many more zeros can we knock off?
Right.
Still got a lot of x-rays? Yeah. So is it inefficient? Absolutely. It's terribly inefficient. But we're still gonna get a lot of x-rays out of even a small exposure. Okay? Now, we feed that into the patient, and pretty much that same scenario takes place inside of the patient. We get x-rays getting close to the nucleus of the atom, and they may create a secondary x-ray photon based on the slowing down of the x-ray photon. If they eject electrons, we're definitely gonna get characteristic out from inside of the patient. Whenever we're, we knock those electrons loose inside the patient's body, we get free radicals. So is it harmful? Potentially, but of all the harmful types of radiation compared to, nuclear meltdowns and things like that, it's much lower. Can one exposure cause some problems?
Potentially.
Potentially. So, what we're gonna learn this semester and we're gonna start next week, actually we'll start Friday. What we're gonna learn this semester in X-ray exposure and the development of the field into a much safer field than what it was originally, because we were killing people. But we put some things into place, and we're gonna teach you throughout the semester how to best protect yourself and how to use these variables to make an X-ray beam that's much safer for the patient. Okay, so we're going to take all this stuff and we're going to break it down over a 16-week period. We're going to talk about each part of that X-ray circuit system, and we're going to learn how we're going to adjust the voltage. We're going to learn how we're going to adjust the amperage to create those things, so that we can maximize this and create a safer X-ray beam for the patient. And again, we're going to build on that in imaging and how the image is created, which Trina's going to start on this semester. We're going to hammer hard next semester, as well as radiobiology. So this is what's going on inside of the patient, and it feeds into what she's going to talk about next semester. I'm glad nobody spent a whole lot of time writing that down. I got like 2/3 of the way with our sophomore students. I got about 2/3 of the way through the lecture, and I looked down and some very very, very good drawings, much better than what I can do. But she had pages of this stuff. I said, this is not first test stuff. This is 16 weeks worth of, just listen, And she was giving me a hard time about it yesterday. Any questions? All the questions.
I wouldn't even know what to ask.
Well, so this thing can only be used so many times before it.
Yeah, and it's, the number of times it can be used depends on the KVP and the MA we use. If we use a lot of high KVP and low amperage, it'll last longer. If we use a lot of low amps or low KVP and high amperage, we'll burn it up a whole lot quicker. So, and we're gonna talk about that too. Specifically what things lead to tube failure. So we're gonna learn about that this semester as well.
Well, I've seen memes, because I looked up radiology memes when I found out I was in the program.
Okay. This ought to be good.
And one was like, too much KVP.
Oh yeah, with blood everywhere?
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that, and so could you describe what that's supposed to be?
Well, the KVP is the power of the X-ray beam. It's just a joke. You can't make anybody explode with KVP.
Okay.
You've seen the one too where the patient puts the ashes on the table and he's hiding around the corner? Yeah, those are fun. But you can't make somebody explode with KVP.
Okay, good.
But it's a joke. I've seen that one too. It's nice. They're wiping down. Oh yeah, too much KVP. Yeah. Anything else?
So for different exposures, the amperage is gonna be different all the time?
Amperage is going to be different. KVP is going to be different. For example, a good example would be, KVP controls the penetration of the X-ray beam. So we want high KVP to penetrate. Whenever we shoot a chest X-ray, it's a complicated subject matter, because what we've got is the lungs, which is what we want to see, but part of the lungs are behind the ribs. and the ribs absorb a lot of x-rays, and the lungs don't absorb much. But we want to see the lungs behind the ribs, so what we have to use is a high kVp to penetrate through the ribs so that we can see the lungs behind them. So, for example, a chest x-ray technique may be 110 kVp at maybe 3.5 mass. So very high kVp, low mass. Mass is milliamperage seconds. It's the overall number of electrons we send. Ribs, on the other hand, if we want to see ribs, we don't want as much penetration of the ribs. We want more absorption inside of the ribs, so we're going to use a lower kVp. We might use 80 kVp, but our mass may be 10. So different anatomies, we're going to use different kVp and different mass levels. Hands, we're going to use maybe 50 kVp at 2 mass. Feet, because feet are a little bit thicker, we're going to use slightly more.
And that's like what you go set on that screen where it's like KVP is the first one and then mass is second.
Yep.
So for the first semester, we have that sheet that we can cheat off of, and then eventually we're gonna have to understand how to do that, right?
First semester, all we want you to do, as far as clinicals go, all we want you to do is really get your positioning down. You don't have to record your technique. Second semester or in your continued competencies, you got, it's really kind of crude, but the checkoff sheets, if you notice, are color-coded, right? Well, what's level 1? Yellow. Why do you suppose it's yellow?
Danger.
Caution.
Because you're probably terrified. So, what bodily function do you lose when you're terrified? So, they're yellow. If you notice on that, there's no place that will be a deal breaker for technique. So your KVP, you want to start taking mental note of what kind of KVP you're using, but in as much as getting your checkoffs, we want you to focus on positioning. And after you get that down, then we want you to start, learning technique. Probably the most common thing that people graduate from the program and the feedback that we get from them is that they didn't feel that they really understood technique enough. And it's something that you learn just by repetition, because what you'll learn is that you set techniques based on what you believe is an average, So you'll form an idea of what kind of technique you're going to use for a chest x-ray, for example, for an average person. Well, your average and my average are going to be two totally different things, So we can touch on technique, but really, that's something you've got to develop in, how much KVP and how much mass you're going to use for a given person. Anything else? So I know this is a little bit scary, but I want you, your feet wet so that, Friday we're going to start really pretty slow. We're going to run through the history of x-rays, how they were discovered, and what equipment they were using, and the circumstances that led up to the discovery of x-rays, because he wasn't looking for it. Was an accidental discovery, really. And we'll talk about how that went down.
Are your tests multiple choice?
Yes.
Sweet.
Yep. They're multiple choice, but they later in the first test again is not. I don't want to say that it's a blow-off test. It's not. But again, there's only so many ways you can ask who invented an X-ray and when was it invented. But starting with the second test, which is atomic structure, it really gets to be more critical thinking. So it's not just, and this part of the reason we start with this class is that it's not just enough to know that X-rays are created, but why are they created? Why are they created in the, according to the theory, in the percentages that they are created, why things are happening inside the patient's body, and why eventually it turns out looking the way it looks on X-ray image. So everything's critical thinking, not just, that it happens, but why does it happen? Very much. Okay. All right, then, I guess I'll see some of y'all on Monday. Hopefully our technology will be hammered out. Is anybody missing any other books aside from the ones that we've talked about today? Trina said there is no packet for intro. There's a person or two, or not intro, but patient care, I think it was. There's no packet for that, so one or two people had mentioned that they didn't have one for, that it wasn't in the bookstore. Has everybody got a packet for this class? How about positioning?
Position.
Monday,
That
Monday
big
class.
thick one.
Yeah, big thick.
That's the 1311?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we
Yeah.
need this?
If you can return it, you could return it. It might be, I don't pull anything out of that. Because, in some of the exercises he has in there are just so far beyond what we need to be focusing on that, I'm just not gonna assign anything out of that.
Okay,
So
so just
if,
return
if you want it, keep it. If you wanna return it, then, I don't wanna denigrate the book at all, but, I think there will probably be places in there that will confuse you. I just don't cloud up the
It's the
workbook, Bush
workbook.
on workbook.
Yeah, because when we first signed up for the classes, it gave us like 20.
Oh, yeah,
books, and I was like,
yeah,
"Yeah,
well,
this
yes.
was one of them.
Yeah, and that really should be an optional.
Okay. Okay.
And somebody brought the book list to me, and part of the reason there were so many is because they were offering every possible offering for online books were listed there. They even have one packet for the program chair before me, and she hadn't been here for 12 years. We hired Trina because she was retiring, and Trina's been here 12, 13 years. So she's been gone for a long time. I don't know why they decided that, but the problem with the online books, and Makia, I think you'd asked about the online books. The problem with the online books, and especially the Bouchon, was that it was only a year access, and we're going to use that for 2 years. So I had them go through and just delete, a lot of that. So it still whittled it down to probably 18, but we got rid of some of them.
I'm just missing the Faber book.
The Faber book, okay.
The imaging and
Swing by Trina's office, she might have one. If she doesn't, Goldie shot a picture of what she has over at Mother Francis, and she might have one over there. But Trina may have one in her office, a previous edition of that as well.
And we only need those 2 access codes, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
I wanted to ask, are the Canvas quizzes, are they using the access codes, like, to get the information for the?
No, the information you can just go through Elsevier. That's been an issue for some time, but you can set up your account through Elsevier, but the quizzes take through Canvas so that they go to your grade book.
But the information's through Elsevier?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to be sure.
And what's the homework? Is the homework gonna be like for this and?
The homework is just gonna be through the access code.
Thank you.
So, and that's what she was asking about. The access code's gonna give you the information, but take the quizzes through Canvas. Yeah. So the quizzes go along with the access code, but take the quizzes through Canvas. Yeah.
Is there a study guide for 1201?
That's intro, no,
Okay.
no. So there should be a study guide for physics, positioning, that's 2309, 1311, and intro, which is, I don't know what
I don't think we're gonna get that one, right? 'Cause
So
that's the one Trina said that we
the,
wanted.
is that the one?
I think so. I think it was
Okay.
like, I can't remember what numbers it was supposed to be, but they don't have it available.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. I know, I think she said, intro, she wasn't gonna have one, but I'm sorry, patient care, she wasn't gonna have one. But intro, I thought she was.
1203 is patient care. She said no.
Okay, 1203 is no.
Okay,
Then
so 1201 is yes.
1201, possibly. I
Oh.
honestly don't know what she's,
Okay.
put over there.
what's the 1311 study guide?
That's a
like
big
that
fat one.
Super
Oh,
thick.
The really big
gray.
fat.
Okay, I was
Yeah.
worried I didn't have it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I took that over there in 2 binder clips, you know, thinking that he was probably gonna have to put them just in separate, you know? And, he said, no, I think I can put them together. And I saw it, and I was like, oh man, that's never gonna hold together, you know, it's gonna fall apart, but. You have one question?
This scares me to death. Can I put that back?
Yeah, you can put it back with it. So incidentally, the difference between those two, you know, the one had the metal housing around it, and the other one, did not. That metal housing, the purpose for that is actually to remove some of the heat. So inside of that, the reason it's heavier is because it's got oil inside of it, and the purpose for the oil is to remove some of the heat and extend the life of the tube. And we'll talk about that this semester as well. We do have metal X-ray tubes, which is really kind of weird, but that one is just a cooling mechanism for the X-ray tube. That's the difference between the two. All right, no other questions, then I'll see some of y'all on Monday, and then see all of y'all on Wednesday.
So Monday we should be online for Zoom.
Yeah. Or, actually not Zoom,
You're pretty-
unless TechSmith goes down, I'm gonna report it and put it into the campus.
Okay.
instead of Zoom.
So we don't have to like necessarily be on
No,
it?
you don't necessarily have to be, you know, out of bed by
Okay.
8:30 in the
Oh
morning.
my gosh, yay. So excited.